It was a fine morning when the story of a man named Jed truly began to take a turn toward the remarkable. To understand where he was going, one must remember where he came from. Jed was a poor mountaineer, a man of simple means who barely kept his family fed through the lean years. He was a man of the woods, a man of the earth, and a man of quiet dignity. Then came that fateful day when destiny decided to intervene. Jed was out hunting, aiming for some food to put on the table, when he fired a shot that missed the mark but hit the jackpot. From the ground came a bubbling crude oil, that is. Some call it black gold or Texas tea. Before anyone could blink, old Jed was a millionaire, the owner of a fortune that would make a king blush. His kinfolk, ever practical and full of advice, told him it was time to move away from the mountain cabin. They said California was the place he ought to be, the land of dreams and sunshine. So, they loaded up the old truck with every pot, pan, and relative they had and moved to Beverly Hills. It was a world of swimming pools and movie stars, a place where the Beverly Hillbillies were about to make their mark. The transition from the quiet mountains to the bustling life of New York City was even more of a whirlwind. As they prepared for their next big adventure, the air was thick with the sounds of a family in motion. Ellie Mae was worrying about the time, shouting that they would miss their plane to New York. Jethro was doing his best to keep up, pleading for everyone to stop yelling. Granny was looking for Shorty and the wagon, but it seemed nobody was truly ready except for the most eager members of the clan. The Clavis were already busy buying up half of New York from a confidence man, or so they thought. Jed felt a bit stranded in the middle of no place, but Ellie Mae urged him to calm down. How could he calm down when Shorty had reported that the man had already sold Central Park? They had to get there before the rest of Manhattan was spoken for. With $85 million hanging in the balance, the stakes were high. The only thing standing in their way, as it turned out, was a minor wardrobe malfunction involving Jethro and his trousers. Once they arrived in the great city, they were met by a man who introduced himself as Honest John Shaker. He was a smooth talker with a quick smile and a story for every occasion. Before they disembarked, he took a moment to explain his status in the city. He claimed to be closely associated with the New York police force, insisting they loved to see him come to town. He called them chums and pals, warning the Clampets that several officers might converge upon him to ask questions concerning unsolved crimes. He portrayed himself as an expert in the field of criminology, a man always ready to help the boys in blue. Jed, being the honest soul he was, felt that helping the police was as fine a thing as a fellow could do. Honest John directed them to meet him later in Central Park near the statue of Daniel Webster, claiming the Great Orator was his third cousin. True to his word, the moment they stepped foot in the terminal, 3 policemen rushed up to Honest John. They grabbed him by the arms and carried him out, presumably to speak with the captain at headquarters. Jed was impressed, believing the captain must have some very tough questions that only a smart fellow like Honest John could answer. The family hailed a cab, and the driver asked where they wanted to go. Jed told him they were headed to the piece of property they were buying, Central Park. The driver was incredulous, asking if they were really buying the park to raise hogs, chickens, and cattle. Jed confirmed it with a nod, while the driver navigated the busy streets with a bit more speed than usual. They arrived at the statue of Daniel Webster just as the sun was casting long shadows over the grass. Jed marveled at the statue, and Jethro, proud of his 6th-grade education, noted that Daniel Webster was so famous they wrote a whole book about him called the Dictionary. Honest John eventually reappeared, looking a bit winded, but still full of talk. He explained that the police had given him 24 hours to get out of town, which he translated to the Clampets as a special favor. He claimed he had persuaded the mayor to leave the city open for 24 hours just for them, so they could see Times Square, Broadway, and 42nd Street in all their neon glory. Jed was touched by the gesture, though he told John he wouldn't have had to go to all that trouble. They walked through the park, and Jed declared it was everything John had promised and more. He praised the man for his clean living and devotion to his fellow man. Granny and the young ones were waiting by the lake, wondering if there were any fish to be caught. Honest John promised them an angler's paradise with exotic New York varieties like gefilte fish and lox. As they admired the view, A commotion broke out nearby. Two rascals snatched a lady's pocketbook and ran. Jed and Jethro were ready to spring into action, but Honest John held them back. He explained with a straight face that it was just a local game called mugging, a sort of keep-away played in the park. He insisted that no one was actually being robbed, as such a thing was unheard of in Central Park. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a man named Mr. Drysdale was having a much harder time. He had paid $50,000 for a bank that turned out to be a bust, and he was taking his frustration out on Miss Hathaway. He told her to think positive, mainly because he was going to deduct the loss from her salary over the next 100 years. Back in the park, the business of buying landmarks continued. Honest John asked Jed what he thought would be a fair price for Central Park. Jed, ever the negotiator, mentioned he had about $5,000 on him. John accepted the cash immediately, claiming it was a sacrifice made for friends. He then pointed out Miss Liberty standing tall in the harbor. He offered the statue to Jed for the paltry sum of $2,000. Jed worried about the logistics of moving such a large lady to the park, but John suggested leaving her where she was so everyone could enjoy her. Jed loved the idea, and John, in a fit of manufactured generosity, threw in the island for free. He even offered to sell Jed the Staten Island ferry so the family could have their own boat. Jed was thrilled, especially when John mentioned a bridge he had picked up at an auction from the estate of Oscar Brooklyn. While Jed was busy acquiring real estate, Jethro and Ellie Mae were busy trying to settle in. They started building a fire pit to cook their victuals, even though they lacked a pot or a cabin. Jethro wandered off and ran into the same rascals from earlier. Thinking they were still playing the game of mugging, Jethro decided to join in. He returned to the family with a haul of treasures, an iron pipe, a shiny chain, a leather-covered fishing sinker, and a set of rings. Jed was concerned that Jethro had played for keeps and told him to take the things back. When Jed went to return the items, the muggers were less than thrilled to see him. They tried to act tough, but Jed's mountain strength and simple kindness were more than they could handle. He accidentally bent their iron pipe while trying to be helpful, and the would-be thieves decided they had seen enough of the Clampett family for one day. The time finally came for Honest John to make his exit. The police had shortened his stay to 1 hour, and he was in a hurry to reach the airport. He told Jed he had to go to Chicago because the heat was off there. The Clampetts were sad to see him go, still believing him to be the finest man they had ever met. Granny offered him some groundhog stew and gopher gravy for the road, which John politely declined. In a rare moment of what might have been genuine guilt, or perhaps just a desire to be rid of them, John told Jed to keep his money and give it to the Indians at the Algonquin Hotel. He hopped into a police car, which he claimed was his private transportation, and headed for the airport without sirens. Jed and his family watched him go, feeling blessed to have met such a dedicated friend of the law. As the sun set over their new park, Jed felt a sense of peace. They were a long way from the mountains, but with a family like theirs and a city like New York, every day was a new story waiting to be told.